Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Research Impact and Intelligence Services, Providing Expertise, which is sponsored by Taylor and Francis. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Okay, so before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to submit questions or comments for our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you like or would like to be addressed. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the Show Captions button on the bottom panel of your screen. You can also turn on automated translation for the captions by clicking the arrow button, toggling on translation, and selecting your preferred language. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording and where to access today's slides. And with that, we're ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Kelly.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for the chance to be here today. I'm a scientist at the University of Ottawa here in Canada, and an associate professor at the University of Ottawa, where I direct a program on meta research and open science. And as part of my program, I also wear a hat with an international organization called DORA, which stands for Declaration on Research Assessment. And today I'll be talking about what DORA is and some of our initiatives, sort of past, current, and future. All right, so if you've not heard of DORA before, DORA, as I said, the Declaration on Research Assessment, and its mission is to advance practical and robust approaches to improve how research is assessed across the globe and in all scholarly disciplines. So quite a tall order. The impetus for DORA, so being more reflective and changing how we assess research and researchers, comes from a historic place where much of the incentives and certainly the metrics used to evaluate research and researchers have heavily been reliant on quantitative metrics. So more outputs equals better research, better researcher. There's a quote from the late Doug Altman, said several decades ago, unfortunately, I think still rings true today. So he said, we need less research, better research, and research done for the right reasons. So DORA is very much looking to incentivize the quality of research and a broad range of research outputs beyond just publications, as opposed to sort of quantitative metrics, simply counting how much we're doing, irrespective of the quality of what we produced. One of the main impetuses for the declaration itself, which started in San Francisco about 13 years ago, was frustration from the community. This included researchers, institutional representation, as well as journals and publishers, pertaining to the use of the journal impact factor. So the journal impact factor is based on a skewed distribution. So it's often driven by a small number of papers, and it's practically impossible to predict the success or quality or rigor of an individual paper using this journal-based metric. So, I'm talking to librarians today, so many of you will know this was a metric created by Eugene Garfield, initially for librarians to help them select which subscription journal bundles to purchase. So this metric has been sort of taken from that use and applied, I think, quite problematically in the assessment of research and researchers. So DORA exists sort of against that historic background, recognizing that the way we're being assessed as researchers and research itself isn't really fit for purpose. And the recognition that, we need to assess research and researchers, but what's currently happening isn't evidence-based. What we're using right now are often flawed and inappropriate metrics for research excellence, and they don't really create the incentives to foster robust and rigorous science. So DORA's goal here is really to foster better ways to move from the sort of status quo historic system to something more qualitative and nuanced. The DORA declaration initially drew attention to the problem of using journal-based metrics for hiring, promotion, and funding decisions, and this sort of need to recognize a broader range of scientific outputs. Many people, when they think of DORA, they think, oh, that's regarding like not using the impact factor or journal-based metrics. But the declaration is actually a nuanced set of 18 distinct recommendations for different interest holders in the community, including funders, institutions, publishers, metric suppliers, and researchers themselves. So DORA's got great growing and global support with more than 25,000 individual and organizational signatories. I wanted to highlight here for the community probably the most relevant recommendations from the declaration, namely those for institutions, of course, researchers as well. So some of the criteria here or recommendations are to be explicit about the criteria used when you're hiring, tenuring, or promoting someone, and clearly highlighting, especially for early career researchers, that what you're interested in when you're selecting for excellence is the content of the paper, not sort of where it sits or what outlet published it. And then secondarily, for the purpose of research assessment, we're really trying to get folks to consider the value of impact of all research outputs. So certainly publications are the main conduit in many research contexts for dissemination and knowledge translation. But there's a whole range, and I think growing range, of activities the modern researcher engages in. So things like open data and open sharing of research outputs, we're suggesting that these are also considered as indicators of research impact. So broadly speaking, DORA, I think, initiated as a more of an awareness raising initiative. So we wanted to increase the awareness of the negative impacts of the existing research assessment practices. And we've moved sort of from that space more towards walking the talk and actually implementing change. So we're working now to develop measures of research assessment reform. We support advocates across the globe in this space in their different jurisdictions trying to make this reform happen. And we work to secure funding to deliver on DORA's missions in a variety of different settings. In terms of approaches, we do a lot of community engagement. So DORA is really unique in that it's very grassroots. So it's driven from people really very passionate about this sort of need for this research assessment reform. And we're able to be quite nimble and do a lot given that sort of grassroots nature. We do a lot of resource development, so toolkits and similar resources are very, very prominent in terms of what we deliver to the community, and I'm going to speak about some of those in a minute. We have partnership building, advising, and convening responsibilities. So earlier this week, for instance, I was called to the Canadian House of Commons to comment on the criteria for selecting research excellence in our country and provide sort of expert opinion and broad context on these types of issues. So in terms of resources, I'll just go through a highlight of a few different resources we have. So one of our resources that I find, especially for folks at institutions, it's quite valuable, are case studies. So on our website, which I'll post some links in the chat following my talk, we have sort of narrative descriptions of how single institutions change their assessment policies. So moving from, that traditional system to something more narrative or qualitative. And so when you think about responsible research assessment, the traditional system of just bean counting how many publications we produced and where we publish doesn't lend itself to implementing any sort of targeted goals. So for instance, if your institution has a goal around AI or a goal around open science or a goal around sort of implementing something that they're not currently doing well, you need incentives and rewards to go from where you are to where you want to be. And so these case studies describe in the context of the institution changes they made, often not sort of broadly, but in a specific context to reform research assessment. And it's not meant to highlight sort of a perfect path to success that any institution can then adopt, but just to understand what experiences others have had and what worked well in their context and how that shared experience might benefit others. The other resource that I'll share is we actually have a whole resource library of tools and key articles that we think support research assessment reform. So there's something in there called the Project Tara Toolkit, and a variety of, for instance, DORA produced one-pagers and sort of infographics like you see there. So some of our most common are there's an infographic on how to debias committees to have more deliberative processing and when you're selecting and hiring and promoting. And then the one on the screen there is building blocks for impact. So talking about the scale of influence and different audiences and how we can have different types of impact and different sort of scales. And then we have Reform State, which was launched in the last year or so. And this is for institutions quite relevant. So it's an observatory of responsible research assessment practices from research institutions. So let's say an institution created a new policy for conducting interviews that would ensure that the questions or the composition of the committee was more in line with sort of DORA recommendations. That guidance or SOP would be shared in Reform State. We also have a range of different other types of documents that are in Reform State, and it's a searchable repository, so you can specify to specific areas, departments, or regions, and find stuff to often act as a starting point if you're trying to reform in a similar area at your own institution. And then finally, I'll mention this resource. So it's a fairly new resource launched in the spring of this year. It's called A Practical Guide to Implementing Responsible Research Assessment at Research Performing Organizations. So when I took on the role of co-chair at DORA, what struck me right away was that many folks in leadership that reached out to me, they understood there was a variety of different sort of change movements happening in the landscape. So there's responsible research assessment, there's open science, there's knowledge mobilization and sort of impact community. There's folks from the EDI space and different initiatives sort of all pushing for changes in our research ecosystem. And this guide, I think, sort of connects all those different initiatives in a way that is cohesive to understand sort of what they are and how they relate to responsible research assessment. So some of the key content in this guide are key activities for a responsible research assessment to develop a strategy at your institution, and then key moments in sort of the research ecosystem or life cycle where you want to think about intervening or at least considering what you're currently doing and whether it's fit for purpose for your goals. So I'll stop there. A big thank you for your time. I'm very happy to take questions at the end, and I'll pop a few links into the chat as others continue to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. And I wanted to follow up and kind of start my presentation in terms of um, basing the work I do on a lot of information that I've learned from reading information on DORA's website, plus other resources that share similar values in terms of research impact, especially as someone who's new to all of this. Here at the University of Houston, I've only been in this role for a few years and still growing the program and the services. So I'm going to highlight a little bit about the UH story and how we're developing research impact and supporting the faculty and researchers here at the University of Houston. But I'm going to give you a little bit about U of H. U of H is a large urban public research institution. We have approximately 47,000 students. And so we're rather large and servicing and helping the faculty who are wanting to educate the students, but of course having to do what's necessary as researchers to research and tell the story of their impact for a variety of reasons. And so from that, I'm going to give you sort of a little bit of background and history, a very short history, because again, only been doing this for a few years, how this all came about. In 2017, the university had a self-imposed initiative called the 50 and 5 Initiative. And it is an initiative that where university leaders and administrators wanted to have a 50% increase in research output and expenditures within 5 years. It was really an ambitious initiative, but felt that the university was poised to be successful. Um, and ultimately, the end goal was to, over time, with those increase in research and productivity, to then hopefully um, elevate the university's rankings, right? And that's metrics and rankings is we could talk forever. That's a completely different webinar that probably needs to be had. But it was really one of the initial motivators for the initiative. And so at that time, the Division of Research here at the university, as well as the Provost's office, um, reached out to the libraries to sort of participate in the initiative by developing workshops, particularly and specifically about researcher profiles, because they wanted to increase the visibility and discovery of the research taking place at the university, but then also informing faculty and researchers about the potential metrics they could find to begin discussing or communicating the impact of the work that they're doing. So we did that. We created two workshops, multiple workshops around those two subjects. And then in the midst of that, the libraries, and that began in 2017. So in 2021, the library had a reorganization. And at that time, I was learning a lot from having discussions, what was taking place during the initiative, about how the libraries could potentially better support the work and be a part of what the university was trying to accomplish. So during the reorganization in 2021, I proposed a visibility and impact position at the library, and was told that, sure, let's do this for a year or two and see how it goes. And so I began in that position as Research Visibility Impact Coordinator. And then once the initiative sort of sunset in 2022, the university saw that the role I was playing was really crucial. And so the libraries kept it as a permanent position. And so in that role, I wanted to learn more about the needs of the university, the needs of the faculty around research impact. And so in 2022, I did a needs assessment, and then in 2024, a faculty survey. And based on that data, I'm now in 2025 and using what I learned from those two assessments to move the services forward. So just an overview of what I discussed and addressed in the needs assessment and the survey. So the needs assessment was really high level. I spoke to university administrators, whether they were vice provosts, a senior associate vice provost, vice chancellors. I spoke with deans of colleges, as well as vice provosts and vice chancellors within the media relations unit at the university. I also spoke with, at the time, the chair of our research and scholarship committee here at the university, as well as people within the division of research. And then I targeted those across the discipline. So I spoke with those who within STEM, those who work within humanities, and also within social sciences. So I wanted a broad overview of what the needs look like across campus. And so what I discovered there was some of the existing practice that the university was already doing that sort of spoke to and aligned with research impact. So there was institutional reporting, of course, coming from the colleges, an annual reporting of faculty activity. And then I also learned that a lot of units on campus were interested in new publication discovery. How do we find what faculty are publishing? Where do we find how they're publishing? And then they were already using sort of Scopus and Web of Science and the metrics built within those two resources to discover a little bit of what impact could look like. And so But then I also identified some of those espoused needs. You know, the faculty wanted to discover how they might collaborate with other researchers. Um, there was a growing interest in alternative metrics because the standard sort of H-index and citation counts did not fit with all of the disciplines. And so there were discussions around how do we get the university to be more accepting of these alternative metrics. And then there was a very great interest, a large interest in using metrics for promotion and tenure as well. And so, and that was in 2022. So a couple of years later in 2024, the survey was designed to target specific individual needs of faculty. So it went from higher level to what the university deems as a priority to targeting individuals and what they truly wanted and were using and wanted out of metrics. What I discovered was there was definitely a difference in priorities from the university to that of the individual faculty. And then also discovered within the disciplines, there were commonalities. And so was any of this influenced by the needs assessment? I don't know what conversations were had with those administrators I spoke with when I did the needs assessment and then within their colleges when I did the survey. So there may have been some influence there. And now, while I gathered a lot of data out of the survey, I wanted to highlight for this webinar this very specific finding. So it sort of really highlights and visualizes the difference in terms of what the faculty members do in terms of their practice around metrics and the use of impact metrics and what they believe the university or their college does in terms of use of impact metrics. So in this slide, you will see that the red line is representative of what the faculty say they do in terms of their personal use of metrics, why they choose the metrics that they use, and to what purpose. And then the blue line represents what the faculty think or believe or know that their individual colleges are collecting in terms of espousing or communicating out the impact of the research taking place within our colleges. So you'll see with many of the categories, there is um, um, you'll see where faculty are doing more of one thing than what they believe the colleges are doing. And so because these are abbreviated, I'm going to just read just some of these that can't see. So this very first one, this is actually fleshed out. It is article, book, and either article or book chapter, data sets, or software downloads. So a lot of the faculty are looking at that as a metric that they look for. And they believe that the university or their college, I'm sorry, that their colleges are doing the same. For the second one, it's citation counts for articles, book chapters, and such. While that is still very popular among faculty, again, they believe the college is doing the same. So it starts to even out. And I purposely included the types of metrics that are not really traditional. So for example, exhibitor performance reviews for our College of Arts and Architecture and Design faculty, as well as our performing arts faculty. Monograph holdings and so on. This one is the monograph sales. You'll see a lot of faculty deem really important. Almost 100% of faculty who answer that said that monograph sales was something that they look for in terms of the impact of their work. But what was really eye-opening is in the not sure category. There were many faculty who surveyed who had no idea what type of metrics their college was collecting and reporting out or reporting up to the provost office. And that is a little jarring. This data, what I did was I ended up drafting a report based on the data I found within the survey, and that report was sent to members of associate vice provosts within the provost's office. And we talk about these findings and how so that they can better understand what faculty are doing and what faculty know in terms of what the provost office is doing. And so what ended up happening is, as a result of this survey, is and a result of me sharing the report out, is that there was an increase in workshops that about various aspects of research impact. There was and as a result of those increased workshops, there were increased consultations and LibGuide views. And so people were discovering that I exist. A lot of faculty, when they received the survey, had no idea that I was here, that I had such a role in the university. And so many of those faculty began attending the workshops. And not just, and we were very intentional about how we created and presented those workshops. I collaborated and co-sponsored these workshops with our division of research and also with our what we call the FED, the Faculty Engagement and Development Unit on campus. And so in order to draw in more faculty and to garner more interest in these workshops. Additionally, I was able to secure a little funding for more library resources. So we were able to um, begin a subscription to Altmetric Explorer, forgive the typo there, Altmetric Explorer for institutions. We also have a Crossref membership that we're utilizing in order to assign DOIs to publications and outputs within our institutional repository so that we can also begin to track any metrics there. I have been given a seat with on Articulate in order to create self-paced online modules for faculty who may not be able to attend workshops, but just to have additional resources for them to learn about the use of metrics. And within the libraries, there's been collaborations with more other librarians within the libraries who live or are housed in the colleges. So for example, the librarian that is within the College of Arts, Architecture, and Design, she and I work together to create workshops and professional development around research impact for their faculty and uniquely designed for their types of output. And then, of course, I have also been working with other librarians in like our medical school as well as our law school to help sort of spread the knowledge and use about metrics in these various units. And then lastly, earlier this year, we became an ORCID campus through our ORCID initiative. The provost office had approved that we become an ORCID campus, and we are now making sure that each faculty member and researcher has an ORCID profile and that they're populating that profile so that we can better gather publication, grant information, all in one sort of way across the campus. Thank you very much, and I look forward to questions in the end.
And thank you. I am Connie Stovall, the Director for Research Impact and Intelligence at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. For those of you who might not know, it is a R1 high intensive research university in Southwest Virginia. And our whole mission around our department is really about helping Virginia Tech grow, not glow, its global impact and reputation. And why is that? It's one of the main priorities for Virginia Tech. We'll get into that in just a little bit more detail in a moment. And I don't usually read from a slide very much, but I will read from this one a little bit. It's a little meaty. So if we go on our website, this information is basically here. So we're all Leiden trained in research indicators, responsible metrics, all the nuances of the metrics. We work with research information management systems, in our case, Elements, and then the profile system, Virginia Tech experts. Of course, as librarians, many, many years of research metadata experience, and overall with experience and other training, just overall the scholarly research enterprise. And so with that collective knowledge, we collect, we process, and we analyze research, policy, patent, funding data, and that helps us deliver research strategy and growth insights. And that helps with partnership engagements too, whether it's another university or a corporation or a national lab. And in that last piece, and these are exact words from Virginia Tech's global distinction page, as what they call it. That's our initiative for growing global impact. And a person on our team also manages our patent and trademark resource center as well. So just like Andrea, I'm going to talk a little bit about how this developed. It's definitely become, it's been a little bit of a lengthy process, and it's been quite organic, but overall I think we've been very well received. So our team currently consists of 7 people. Definitely has not always been that way. I can say 5 or 6 years ago, myself and Rachel Miles were working in parallel and under different deans. I was performing mostly research intelligence for a team at Virginia Tech called Innovation and Partnerships. That's housed within Office of Research. So I was using a lot of these tools, a lot of these metrics associated with research impact, but sort of using it for strategy before the fact so that you can strengthen your research impact. And then found myself doing a lot of research impact work too. Alongside me, Rachel was hired as a research impact librarian. And part of the impetus from that was from our dean and the university administration because of our global aspirations. They wanted somebody to be on campus who could help provide workshops, but also participate in helping with the research information management system. The library does not do that on its own. We work in conjunction with Faculty Affairs and the Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Analytics. As both of us were learning so much more about this along the way, it became apparent that to really strengthen our message and give some more robustness to what we're doing, it seemed really important to join forces. And at the same time, we had an engineering librarian who retired, and we were able to replace that person and have that person report to me. Her name is Sarah Over. And so she performs a lot of the liaison duties that you would associate with a liaison librarian. But because she does have a PhD in engineering, she can code. She's also able to help me with a lot of the research intelligence work as well. And I mean, so much of what we do at Virginia Tech is in engineering, so it's really been key. She also serves as a supervisor currently to a GRA funded position. We've been able to do this for 2 years. We typically hire computer science or data analytics students. This has become incredibly necessary to build a robust team. You're talking about tons and tons of data, and the more that this is demanded, Excel spreadsheets and the like are not always the best way to go about this. I mean, you're working with disparate data and you want to be able to clean that data. And so we all have some coding experience to a degree, but these graduate students are helping us a lot. At the same time then too, Rachel was able to hire another person to help with her, given that she is now basically leading all of these meetings around our research information management system, plus trying to be a liaison to the psychology department, and plus help people with reporting for research impact. It become a lot of work. And we're having a lot of demand here because I really like to say that our team's been very well received and respected for the kind of work that we've been able to help people with. So she was able to hire Emily Mazur, and she helps primarily with the research impact and research information management system as well. And they're actually presenting today at a conference, Expert Finder Systems, about Virginia Tech Experts, our profile system. Brian Craig is sort of our jack of all trades. He's responsible for these slides and helping me with those, but he is also helping us reconcile Scopus IDs all over campus so we can pull better data on the fly. And he helps with curation services. So part of the research information management work that we do is that the library leads curation of CVs for ingestion, because it just won't get in there a lot of times unless someone is able to help them. And our last hire has been incredible for us. You know, I told people if I had a dream come true to make this team really great, and I was kind of never really didn't know if anybody would ever take me serious. I need a data scientist. If we had a data scientist, we would be able to produce studies about this. We would be able to work with institutional effectiveness, who has public and behind the sign-in dashboards of all kinds of analysis across the university, whether it's about teaching, whether it's about benchmarking us against other areas, it's about understanding our funding and the like. And so Mary came on board in January, and she is really helping the team along. So again, a little bit why is Virginia Tech is investing in us. I mean, as long as I've known Virginia Tech, I've been working with them 18 years, except for about a gap and a year and a half when I left and then came back. They've always been interested in the rankings, and I know that that is very controversial and understandable. At the other side of the coin too, we're not an MIT or we're not a Stanford. And what we find is when we benchmark ourselves against, say, all the AAU members or all the APLU members, we're doing really good in terms of our citations, in terms of number of publications, all the metrics, basically, with the exception maybe of international collaboration. And that ties into what I'm about to say here, is we don't have that brand name recognition globally yet that some of these other institutions do, and that is a major priority for Virginia Tech. You know, and part of it goes back to our institutional history and our location. We are in the middle of Appalachia, what you see back here behind me, that is probably 3 or 4 hours to the closest large city as well. It's another reason that we've started a new campus in the DC area as well. But even going back to this history too, of even incorporating this research intelligence component of it in it. So a lot of us librarians have been learning these tools like SciVal and Insights, and then we try to teach them to other people or funding institutional, whatever it is. And then what happens is that they're all just deep enough that when people walk away from them and don't use it for 6 months, they have to start all over again. And so I started going to these training sessions and user groups. And to me, it was just like, why don't I start offering this as a service? So I can at least help other people help themselves a little bit more. So that's part of that. But all of this overall is, to me, a natural outgrowth of our expertise as librarians. It just requires that we become more comfortable with data. You often have to be outside of the library, very much more so than you would in some other positions. And then I really am very grateful for some progressive library leadership where people can think outside of what they think librarians should be doing, and that makes a difference. And having a good relationship then with the administrators as well. So about the research information system, so we do provide those workshops and consultations. That means that Emily and Rachel are monitoring and advising updates to the system, which are pretty frequent, it feels like. And then any kind of data integrations as well. So within our system, you can pull in automatically Scopus data, dimensions data, and the like, and information from our institutional repository. But then we're also investigating how we can connect this with the ORCID as well, ORCID Write. That's been a little bit of a challenge, though, for reasons I won't go into here. And I mentioned also curating those researcher CVs if you want to go back retrospectively, perhaps 5 years or something like that. And some of the colleges have already taken us up on that. We still have a lot of work to do. You know, we have to think about how far we can go back. A lot of times we train students to do this, or Brian Craig helps us with that as well. And recently, particularly because now we have our data science, this person who has very strong statistics background can help with user testing and understanding how everyone's using the system and how we might improve it. Let's see, we'll go right next. Also, this does serve as the basis for Virginia Tech's experts, the profile system, and we do outreach for that. This is, if you're not at this stage already, this is a really cautionary tale. So when we first started using Elements in 2014, it was not required. They just kept hoping they would get buy-in. Well, they finally had to make it required. That's also where you have to deposit your faculty activity report. For Virginia Tech experts, unfortunately, it is a opt-in system. And so we have, we're in the business of trying to convince people this is benefits you as in terms of your own research impact and Virginia Tech's for you to have this open profile. We've certainly have mixed results with that. And it's a really shame because one of the common questions that I get from departments all over the campus on like overnight, it's like, oh, this company's coming tomorrow. Who's our expert in X, Y, and Z? And these profiles are designed for that. And you know, you can only know so much when you have 5,000 people working at your university. So these are quite helpful indeed. On to research impacted itself. And just to let you know, attacking on to the first speaker as well, we are very well versed in responsible use and in talking about responsible and ethical use of metrics is interwoven within every workshop, with every consultation that we talk about. Are we at the point that we've gotten Virginia Tech ready to say, oh, we're not going to participate in the rankings? That's, we're not there. And I think a lot of United States universities are not there. Are we at the point that we are using all qualitative reviews rather than metrics? Virginia Tech is not there. That might be very appropriate in some areas for the university, and we certainly talk about all of the differences as well. So one of the things that we do is advise on some of the data sources that can be used, what those indicators mean, what the problems can be associated with them, what your impact strategies can be, how you can increase your readership, how you can ethically increase your citation impact. And then, of course, we're helping provide, collect and report out at the individual unit or even college level. It's definitely not campus-wide at this time. It's as people request us. And so there are some situations where some organizations or institutes are so large, we've actually been able to train people within their unit to use some of these tools, like create a whole custom group of an institute in Dimensions or SciVal, so that they can track their publications, their productivity and impact, and their patents and policy work as well. And part of that then is using that training that we've gotten from Leiden for using tools like FOSSViewer, so we can visualize that science. You can take all of the vet med school and put in their collective publications for the year or the past 5 years and really get a sense in a visual way the research strengths. And that also ties into the research intelligence as well, where you can use those same kinds of tools where you can see our strengths, look at somebody else and see our weaknesses. What are our gaps? What kind of collaborators might we need to strengthen a proposal, or if we want to hire someone? So those are some of the things that we do there as well. And I'm forgetting all kinds of things, so you all ask me questions. I'm trying to leave plenty of time for questions here. Research intelligence, our responsibilities, again, it's about extracting data, delivering these reports and dashboards. Another thing that we're doing, partly because I've seen smaller colleges do it, so it's a huge undertaking for us, is in order to really get better data, is to reconcile all the Scopus IDs and merge them where they have multiple IDs. It happens all the time because most people don't even know that they exist. And so using our API, our data scientist, and then code that she's ever able to give us, then we can call metrics on the fly. And we can put some of these metrics up in a dashboard behind a login so that department heads and deans can see some of these data as well. We also provide workshops and consultations so you can do some of this work on your own, so that we can show you how to set up for funding databases and look at opportunities, but also look retrospectively and see who's gotten those grants already and what's, because you need to think about what your niche is. And so having both sides of that spectrum help. And it's the same with looking at market intelligence as well. If you're developing a device in the biomedical field, what's out there already? And you'd be surprised at the number of people, just my having worked with the intellectual property office, that have not done their due diligence or don't really feel comfortable or know how to use a patent searching database to understand if they've got something out there, or if they've already let the cat out of the bag by publishing something. So we do some basic patent searching as well. So yeah, this looks like a thematic gap analysis. Like I said, kind of visualizing maybe a research theme or understanding even who your collaborators are, for instance. Other things that don't necessarily include the metrics would be looking at some approach. Maybe you want to create a program or a new center. Well, let's look at the programs out there that already exist that are like this. What's different about us? What are our strengths? How do we fill the gaps to make a better program? And we've also used a lot of these indicators, not solely to hire anybody. We would never, ever, ever do that at Virginia Tech. But if we already have a list of people that we would consider for a marquee hire or a cluster hire, then I would pull information on that person as well. But that doesn't just include their indicators. It looks at, I might go to the website and see where their graduate students have placed, for instance. But anyway, these gap analyses include the research, looking at funding, looking at patents, looking at the market, potential collaborators, in some cases, taking a deep dive into facilities and equipment, and even using Google Docs, Google Maps to the aerial view to see what the facilities look like, what the companies are around them, and who they're working with. But anyway, there's no one set process where you do every one of those components. Sometimes it might be somebody just wants the research or somebody wants just the funding. But I'm currently working on a framework to help this process and help others and hopefully publish that in the future. Move along because I know we're just about out of time. I'll just let y'all have this for the future, but this just lets you know for the past year some of our own metrics associated with what we've done. We love to talk about this because we learn from other people, and we're happy to help make this a reality for you at other institutions. So please just get in touch with us. And thank you so much for having me here.
Great. Thank you to the three of you. I'm going to jump right in with one of the questions, and I want to do a spin-off of that. So while it might seem it's directly for Kelly, I want to open it up to the others, but it's related to in health sciences librarianship. It seems that the publish or perish concept has expanded into medical students' belief that multiple publications, including evidence synthesis articles, will enhance their competitive residency applications. It's a problem on a number of levels. Any awareness of moving DORA type appraisal into areas such as training for residency application review boards? And with that, it would be great if the panelists could also speak to some of the disciplinary differences that you see, and along with any movement in terms of how students, graduate students, postdocs are approaching this area. So why don't we start with Kelly, because of the DORA question?
Absolutely. I like this question. It really resonates with my experience. Personally, I'm in a faculty of medicine as well. And this summer, I interviewed med students for like a research sort of placement over the 4-month break. And it was really interesting how many of them, when I asked them a simple question, why are you interested in working in the team, like on this project this summer? How many of them responded to get a publication? That they wanted to publish. They wanted to add a publication to their CV. So they weren't interested in learning skills. They weren't interested in the topic. They like their core interest was just to publish. And I thought, how sad is this that already at such an early career stage, they're already this like absolute emphasis on just like getting stuff out there, when really this is quite truly the time when they should be like learning and taking on new opportunities to, have the time and space and peace of mind to actually like understand the research ecosystem before they get more embedded into it. Certainly, we all need knowledge, like continuing education. But the question really resonates with me. I think DORA has done a lot on early career researchers broadly, and specifically in some contexts as well. Certainly, there are disciplinary differences. My sense is that within the humanities, some of the degree of entrenchment of some of the over reliance on journal publications or journal impact factor tends not to be as entrenched as in, say, medicine or natural sciences. But I think that there are problems across the board, across all disciplines and career stages.
What, Andrea and Connie, are you seeing some of those disciplinary differences just in terms of, health sciences certainly has one approach, but from the others?
Do you mean in terms of their research evaluation?
Yeah, or the meeting their needs. Just I was thinking about yeah, sorry, maybe I'm making it more confusing then.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all somewhat different. Sure, we haven't, strangely enough, worked as much with the humanities departments. And I mean, they were some of the latest adopters of our RIM system, unfortunately. And part of the reason we even have the RIM system is because we want to be able to look at something holistically, or comprehensively is probably a better word here. I think there's a lot of doubt, mistrust in any of the systems, and I think a level of fear of having even less funding than they already do when people start looking at the numbers. But that's part of the reason that we are here, is so that we can explain the citation and scholarly output differences and just the overall research cultural differences between disciplines. And some people really understand and know that, and then some people don't know at all. And it's quite shocking, especially, you know, when literally your livelihoods depend on it at the end of the day. As far as reporting, like I said, I mean, I think a lot of those are fairly similar across the board. They're looking at their output, citations. Some ask for, you know, what tier or quartile that most of our publications are occurring in. We have tried to push altmetrics a bit, and mostly I think people find them interesting but not helpful, really. But we do have Overton policy documents now, and I find that tremendously helpful. And so we are trying to incorporate that more into our work. And of course, because you know, we have tools like Dimensions AI, and you know, we have a patent person that works with us too. You know, we can collect the number of patents and patent applications as well.
Yeah.
There are other things beyond that too. I'm really just focusing on the metrics here, but if you're interested in anything else, please ask.
For me at the University of Houston during the 50-5 initiative, we noticed and observed that it was the humanities faculty who were most interested in learning about metrics in those workshops that we were giving. And so what I did was I took the initiative of stepping out and creating workshops exclusively for our humanities researchers, because they were like, you know, H-index and citation means nothing to us. How do we, right? What are our metrics? How do we communicate? And so they became my initial sort of target audience when I was sort of learning these things myself. And that has continued. They're still very much interested. Whenever I hold workshops, I still get lots of humanists attending because they're still trying to understand how to translate this to their work, if they can. And I'm very intentional about making sure that they have avenues for and resources for how to communicate the impact of their work. And if I can quickly sort of go back to the initial sort of talk around students, right? I held a workshop. I was asked to do a workshop for the graduate school to sort of have early conversations with them before they or delve into academia, you know, in whichever areas they were going. And I was happy to see that a lot of the students were, yeah, there, of course, there are the learning, you must publish, publish, publish. But a lot of students were like, well, yeah, but I want to have more impact than that. How do I, you know,
Right.
learn how my work is affecting my community or others? And so, which was refreshing to hear. So yeah, to be able to have those conversations with them before they're sort of tainted by like, I just have to publish, 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 right? So that they have some knowledge going into that.
I can add anything, you know, one conversation I would love to be able to have in this kind of venue one day is the difference in research culture between the US, the UK, Europe, Canada, and it is striking. You know, we have a long way to go in the United States, I think, to not be so number centric.
I think it's so interesting because I think the different entry points in different countries, different disciplines are different, and so that's one of the challenges with the responsible research assessment is that it's not a one size fits all model that you know you can just resolve everything at an institution or within a country. So
Right.
I really push for monitoring and evaluation. So we know the current system doesn't work. We got to try new things. It's an experiment. And so it's not going to be a revolution. It's going to be an evolution. And you know, you're going to have to pick off things that you prioritize and try and build from there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sabrina, do we have time for just one more, or are we at time?
Yeah, maybe one quick one.
So we had a lot of questions about ORCID, and I think one of the questions that maybe could address some of the problems is there was a question about working with licensing colleagues in terms of negotiating leverage to get publishers to do better with regard to research information, such as requiring them to have authors use ORCID IDs. So I'm just kind of wondering if you have worked with your colleagues in the libraries about negotiating for things like that that would help downstream.
Done some work in Canada. My previous institution on this, there's a network of sort of institutions in Canada, a consortium working on ORCID. And one thing that's really great is that it's not just publications. ORCID can track a whole range of different outputs, including funding, peer review, so it's a way of sort of automating that. I think once researchers know what it is, it really appeals to them because it's able to capture things in a consistent and automated way.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll just say thanks so much to Kelly, Andrea, Connie for taking the time to speak with us today, and thank you to Emily for hosting the Q&A. Thank you to our attendees for your questions and comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice with a link to the recording and where to access the slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session.
Take care. Thank you.